step back to the year 1994, back when Buick meant less expensive Cadillac and not more expensive Chevrolet. Anyway, Buick took their largest flagship luxury vehicle, the Roadmaster, and tossed in a modified version of the Corvette's LT1 5.7 liter engine. Now, when I say modified, I don't necessarily mean more power, I actually mean less power and better drivability. That means an iron head instead of aluminum and a less aggressive cam for more low-end power. Anyway, this was a full-ass size, 260 horsepower, 300 foot-pounds of torque, rear-wheel drive, kind of Corvette-powered Impala SS-ish station wagon. These cars are cool. This was before AMG made station wagons. There was no real wagon competition in the US, but they still did it anyway. And with its subdued styling, SUV-like handling, and quickly dated fake wood panel trim, nobody really cared. And that's why today, these cars can be had in really solid condition for $5,000 to $7,000. Now, you're probably not gonna win any races with these things because they're huge, but they do have a honking V8. They do fantastic burnouts, and it has a pop-up turbo seat that you won't even use, but it's pretty fun to look at and show people. They're awesome cars. I freak out every time I see one and people look at me all weird like nobody cares, but I really feel like it's because none of you know how sick these cars are. Anyway, I digress. Let's move on. Keeping in the same era, Volvo was pulling some of the same as Buick when it comes to a super sleeper station wagon. A company that was known, and realistically still is known, for making safe and boring cars, actually slid out some super performance wagons in their time. More specifically, I'm referring to the 1996 Volvo 850R Estate. The 850R Estate looked just like the regular old boring Volvo with its rather square and boxy design they were known for, but under the hood was a turbocharged 2.3 liter inline 5-cylinder engine that produced 240 horsepower. That was built to last pretty much forever. That's V8 numbers at the time, but in a smaller package and a more aggressive power curve. And all it took was a less restrictive exhaust and a little bit more boost to make 300 wheel horsepower. 300! In 1996! Hell, even today, 300 wheel horsepower is good enough to run a mid-13 quarter mile and will pretty much hold its own against most cars on the street today. The engine wasn't the only change for the R trim either. These things had stiffer suspension, larger sway bars, and Alcantara interior pieces. The Volvo wagons were the epitome of hauling stuff and people all over the country. With an engine that makes barely less power than a newer than it Audi S4 with a bigger engine and twin turbos, it's hard for me to comprehend that these weren't more desirable than they were. Alas, these never really took off outside of your Volvo enthusiast community, which is extremely unfortunate because on paper, these things check most of the enthusiast boxes, and they really deserve more recognition for being that nearly perfectly well-rounded vehicle between handling, power, utility, reliability, and even comfort. And in my opinion, these cars' looks are timeless in such a subtly aggressive manner. The spoiler on the hatch, the lip molded into the bumper, and oh my god, that 5-cylinder exhaust sound. I think what ultimately led to this car not catching on in the United States is the fact that a manual transmission wouldn't be an option in North America. And although manual swaps are pretty straightforward and common in the Volvo community, the car kind of missed its entire mark and probably won't ever receive the love that it deserves on a large scale. Which is why these cars are still really cheap. Again, you're probably looking at $5,000 to $7,000 for a car that will literally do it all and last forever. The Volvo 850R is one of the greatest wagons of all time. You know, if you thought Volvo was done making cool station wagons that nobody knows about, you're still wrong. Just a couple years ago, Volvo actually dropped their brand new V90 wagon in T8 trim. It's certainly not as racy as the letter R, but what T8 does mean is that this luxury station wagon has a supercharged and a turbocharged 2-liter engine producing 315 horsepower with a big old boost from an 86 horsepower electric motor for a combined output of 401 horsepower and 472 foot-pounds of torque, allowing this 4,600 pound lard to get to 60 in under 5 seconds. Not bad for a 2-liter from Volvo. All this tech will cost you a little bit though. These cars are still selling in the high 30s and getting into the low 40s. But there's no way we could get away from the 90s cool wagons without making a stop at the Bmw M5 touring of the E34 generation. Now, the US never officially actually got any of these cars, but of the 891 hand-built M5 tourings produced in the world, it's noted that about 30 or so did make it to the US and have become federally legalized. And they even